approximately 14 or so billion years ago, it was dark. A long, long time ago. Sorry, I just want to try that out. A long, long time ago, the universe was just a void of blackness. It was dark, cold, no life to it. Where are we? May someone ask. Till one day, about 14 or so billion years ago, bam, the universe was created and they formed these little doohickeys that are called galaxies. They're made up of clusters of stars, and maybe one day they'll collide and to make this even bigger galaxy. And also, a lot of those galaxies were made of rocks, ice, and dust, and some other shit that I won't talk about. And somewhere in the Milky Way, the galaxy we're in, there's a region called the solar system. It's somewhere right there, or it's that way, or that way. I'm not going to go into detail. Anyways, it was empty until the sun came along about 4.6 billion years ago or something like that. And they had 9 planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They all form the solar system and they orbit around the sun. The planet we're going to be focusing on today is the third planet, the smallest one, not the smallest, but same size as Venus, one with the habitable zone, and the only planet that can support life, Earth. Now, Earth, as we know it, was not like this about 4.6 billion years ago. It was like this. It was magma until one day an asteroid came along and it smashed into the side of the Earth. And now, I guess it's still empty. But now the moon is here, so the Earth is now no longer alone. So that's fun. And the moon orbits around the Earth, which is still magma. And then some water came along eventually. And down the Earth is now blue. But there's no life on it yet. The Earth was like this. There was nothing supporting it. It was just rock and water. And until eventually the Earth gained its stuff. And some like stuff more like the atmosphere, the ozone layer, yada yada yada, the stratosphere. And now there's grass and the sun's on the Earth, and the water's more blue. Now there's plants and trees and clouds. What a perfect life indeed. After the Earth was done molding, the Earth became ice about, I don't know, some 2 billion years ago. And also Gondwana was formed. And yeah, this is the big continent, as well as Gondwana. And this was about 530 million years ago or so. Now, the Earth was mostly still ocean. But let's go deep into the water. Now, occasionally, from time to time, the water was empty, but there was also some life. Just to clarify, of course, the life was not just a single cell, just a DNA symbol. Anyways, about 550 million to 530 million years ago, it's the Cambrian explosion, where they had some weird stuff, like a squid, maybe a lobster, maybe a crab back there. I have no idea. So now there's critters roaming around the ocean, and it's lovely. And it was like this until they all died eventually. And now there's these big lizards going on the land, and they have to get their food and stuff. And then eventually they evolved into the dinosaurs, which are very big-looking creatures, big lizards. They also like eating each other, I guess. You got the herbivores. They're chill. They eat plants, and they look cool. You got the carnivores, which are tough, likes meat, and looks very less threatening, I guess, because of their small-ass arms. And then they also killed each other. No, I'm being serious. They literally killed each other. Until one day, an asteroid came along. It smashed into the Earth. And then the dinosaurs all died. Except there were some survivors, like these little bird things. Got some, I have no idea what the hell this is, a beaver and a croc and whatever the hell this is. These bird-like creatures would eventually evolve into birds. And now the Earth looks like this. The flora and fauna roaming around the entire world. And Earth is still Pangea, as you can clearly see. But eventually the continent split apart. And now, about 65 million years ago, the Earth looks like this. But let's focus our shift about right here. Ignore that. Where the Neanderthals are things. They aren't humans, but they live up there, somewhere in like Europe or so. But right here is where the first modern humans came into existence. They lived right here, and they started moving upwards, maybe around, I don't know, moved into Arabia, and maybe forward somewhere into India, and then they went to Europe. Once the humans reached Europe, the Neanderthals, which made the Neanderthals very uncomfortable, they all just died suddenly. But now that's their land now, so it doesn't even matter. Anyways, the humans kept moving into Asia. They reached India and Indochina and China and Siberia and Japan. And there was also a land bridge connecting to Japan, so that's how they got to it. And also about this planet of Kamchatka. And they crossed over a continental ice land bridge into North America as well. And now they live in the Americas. For a while, the caveman lived in caves, and they made these cool little cave paintings and these bowl-like things that probably can mean a lot, but I guess we won't know for a while, I guess. And they also had these stone tools where they can make stuff, which was probably used for wielding or some shit like that. And now farming's a thing. And people are now using agriculture to expand around the world. It's now a part of their society. So that's something. Now that humans can have food, they also need a good source of water. So what do? They went to the rivers and the lakes and the ponds. That's how they got water. So they have water, food, and agriculture and livestock. What a good life indeed. They also built these buildings so they can live in. They also developed fire. And they're probably about 3,000 years ago, probably in modern Iraq, you got the Uruk civilization in about 5,000 BC-ish. And they also live on these rivers, which kept them alive. Now, Uruk was interesting. Not only was it underdeveloped as fuck, they also have these stone tablets, which probably can seem a lot of things. You also got the Egyptians, who were getting jiggy with it by building these giant pyramids and this lion-looking creature that, probably has a hard time breathing because it does not have a nose. They also write these hieroglyphics that can depict pictures and stuff. And they're rulers, which look very godly. And they kept doing this for a while. And then eventually they started doing depictions of their sun god, also known as Ra. And he looks pretty godly. Anyways, Sumer comes into existence in Arabia, which is where Uruk was, probably in the region of Mesopotamia, and they rely on the Euphrates and Tigris River to survive. You also got Assyria up there. And they also built these big things called ziggurats. And can't forget the Minoans who come into existence, who are probably in southern Greece as of right now, and they have pretty cool cities. And now it's the Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age is where people start using iron to make their tools. And, well, not iron yet, but bronze. And now everyone can just switch from stone to bronze. China also has a millet farming people who are now using bronze. Their stuff, and now people are getting somewhere. And the Indus River Valley civilization also gets the bronze and stuff. Why is it called the Indus River Valley civilization? Well, it's because they're situated on the Indus River. Also, people use horses to get around. Now, the Egyptians, they may use camels, but that's okay. Speaking of Egypt, they also got these new kingdom and their pharaohs. And also rice was just brought to Malaysia, probably from Indochina. And they also make these wheels. So now people can make pottery. Like, look at all this Minoan pottery. Speaking of the Minoans, they also depict their rulers and the women. In about 2000 BC-ish, Yu the Great from Shah Dynasty forms the Shah Dynasty. And however, historians believe that this dynasty may or may not have existed, but let's just say it did. In about 2330 BC to 2000 BC, Sumer was conquered by the Akkadians, like this, and it was led by Sargon, who eventually died later. Europe is also having new language families, and specifically the Balto-Slavics, or just Slavic in general. Nothing going on here yet. It's what's been happening in other places of the world. Well, the Indus River Valley civilization is dead, and the Greeks are also still being Greeks, which is discovering math, science, and philosophy as well. Also, the Bronze Age collapsed, but that doesn't matter. So Shah was taken over by Shang, and Shang uses bronze, and they also kind of conquer stuff. And Japan is becoming more Japan. I have no idea if this picture is coming from the correct time period, but I don't care. The Hades Empire is also dead, but at least those Greek city-states won't have to worry. Speaking of Greek city-states, let's talk about one specifically, Sparta. Now, Sparta's queen, Helen, was taken, and now she's in a city called Troy. So they have the Achaeans go fight, and they bring this giant horse in. You're like, wow, it's a gift. But it was really them all along. And so the queen is returned. However, historians believe this is just a myth, but we'll just say it happened. Just for the sake of humanity, I guess. Okay. Anyways, the Iron Age has officially began, and now people are using iron to make their stuff because bronze is for fucking nerds. And the Israeli kingdoms are going well. Hopefully they won't be conquered by some Neo-Assyrian empire. In about 500 BC, some guy named Cyrus says, hey, I'm going to make an empire, and you can't do anything to stop me. So he creates the Achaemenid Empire. It's pretty cool. And it's the Zhou dynasty is finally here. And the Romans are also just being more Roman, and they form a republic. Maybe one day they'll achieve their glory. Anyways, back in Zhou, they're starting to build these new temples, and Alexander, who is from North Macedon, conquers the entire Achaemenid Empire, and then he died. Anyways, the Roman Republic's still thriving, and they're also enemies with Carthage. Now, Carthage goes into a war with them, and they lose. And they also take their islands, and Hamilcar has children, notably Hannibal. He goes to Spain, and then he crosses through France as another war began. And normally you wouldn't cross through the giant, dangerous, snowy-ass Alps, but Hannibal decided to, hey, let's cross through the Alps. And so he starts crossing through the Alps. A lot of men die, but then he eventually reaches Rome or northern Italy. He tries persuading the people to join them, which a lot of them did. And another few more battles ensued. And Carthage lost again. And Hannibal eventually committed suicide. And then Rome, after another war, Rome conquered Carthage. Now they're building an actual empire. And Spain. Zhou collapsed, and now Jin is the most important dynasty, which they eventually formed the Qin dynasty, right here. And with the emperor, or king, decides being a king sucks. So Yingzheng eventually becomes Qin Shi Huang as the first emperor of China. And he builds this terracotta army and starts building this great wall, which I have no idea when it will be finished. The Han Empire eventually comes, and it's considered the golden age of Chinese history. The also Mauryan Empire, which existed from 300 BC to 185 BC, is here. Also, Buddhism just got invented. Axum is existing, and the Silk Road has just been made. You can transport silk with camels. This is what the world looks like. And the Parthians are getting very powerful. In about 144 BC, Julius Caesar becomes the leader of Rome. He then conquers France in the Gallic Wars, and he successfully does. And now France is owned by Rome. And back to the Egyptians, Cleopatra is the monarch of the Romans, and Julius Caesar has officially established himself as dictator. Now, a man named Brutus approached Julius Caesar. As you can tell, his name is Brutus. And he goes, hey man, you're going to become a tyrant, and I'm going to kill you. Which Caesar replied, nuh-uh. Brutus said, yeah-huh. And him and the Senate proceeded to stab Caesar to death 23 times. And since assassinating people in Rome was such a very good idea, Another politician named Cicero was also assassinated, but however, he said, "Hey man, kill me," and so he got killed. And now Rome is still Rome. When in 27 BC, the new emperor, also known as Augustus or Octavian, or if you want to be very specific, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus, officially establishes Rome. And actually, he was a adopted son of Julius Caesar. He also defeats Mark Antony, and they all kill themselves. And now Egypt's under fully Roman control. In 27 BCE, he abolishes the council, says no. And anyways, like I said, he forms Rome. And Rome is a thriving empire. What's going on in other places in the world? Well, the new dynasties, or Han, is still building, and they have more art. And now their emperor Ping, who was 8 years old, dies. And Augustus also dies. And now Tiberius is the emperor. About right here in the region of Palestine, a man by the name of Jesus Christ comes along, and he has 12 apostles. Remember this one. He's important. And he also believes in God, because he's the son, and peace. In 30 CE or 33 CE or about, Julius Caesar is crucified along with 2 other prisoners. And now people loved him so much that they form a new religion, Christianity. And Tiberius also dies. He gets succeeded, and then he dies. And now he's succeeded by Claudius, who begins invading England. And that kind of goes pretty well, as you can clearly see. Now Rome has England. And 54 CE, Claudius dies, and Nero succeeds him. And he's a bit weird, having married his family members and stuff. 64 CE, a fire breaks out in Rome, and he just kind of looked out his window, and he may have fiddled to it. And then Nero went to the Christians, who are currently led by Peter. He says, "You did this." And so he had St. Peter crucified upside down. And you might be wondering, hey, why did I say St. Peter? But he's just Peter. Well, see, after St. Peter's death, he was made a saint. So, and then Nero killed himself, but that doesn't matter. Anyways, Ghana is being Ghana, and they're starting to trade. So, that's cool. Also, the Mayans are starting to build stuff. The Olmecs existed at one point, but they've been long gone. The Mayans also make this giant calendar, which could predict the end of the world. And the Romans start building this Colosseum and officially conquer England as well. Fully. Not just barely, fully. They also are scared of Scots, so they just build this giant wall. Anyways, Rome is now big, and they're still enemies with Parthia, so they're getting mad. And so they go to war, and the Romans win, obviously coming out strong. This probably won't ruin their image or anything. Back on the other side of the world, specifically here in India, they're now starting to trade with people and also invading each other. And Han splits into different multiple warlords. And some extent into Vietnam. Remember this guy, he's important. So now Han is basically ruled by this guy named Dong Zhuo. And Dong Zhuo, came back to the capital burning down, and as well as the emperor. And he kills the emperor. He makes his brother the emperor. And he also has his son, adopted son, Lu Bu. One day they come across a woman. And now Dong Zhuo and Lu Bu are in love with this woman. Lu Bu believes that the woman loves him, and he loves the woman too. But the same thing goes for Dong Zhuo as well. So Lu Bu found out about this, and he wasn't happy. So he killed his adopted father. And then he burnt his body. Now this guy, Cao Cao, he comes to power, as you can clearly see here. He teams up with Liu Bei, and together they end Lu Bu's life. Well, not his life, but his kingdom. And they win. And Lu Bu, he wants to fight for Cao Cao. And now Cao Cao, knowing Lu Bu, he just executes him. And so after a while, there's also some other irrelevant warlords like Yuan Shu, Yuan Shao, and Sun Tzu. Yuan Shu and Yuan Shao are actually brothers. And Sun Ce was the son of Sun Jian. Yuan Shu eventually established the Zhong dynasty as the emperor, and then he died. Yuan Shao attacked Cao Cao over probably jealousy and then died. And Sun Ce died because he got assassinated. And he was succeeded by Sun Qian. And Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Qian would eventually form 3 kingdoms. No, Wei, Shu, and Wu. Cao Cao didn't actually rule Wei under the name Wei because he died in about 220. So now Liu Bei followed suit, dying in 223, and Sun Qian died in 252. And now the Jin dynasty eventually conquered Han, aroused the 3 kingdoms, and this may influence in Japan. So now the Romans eventually decide to split because it's just too big to handle, so they split into 2 different kingdoms, but they're still ruled by one guy. So, and his name is Constantine, and he's the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. So that's good, because back then he probably got arrested for it and probably killed. But this is what the world looks like now. So the Eastern Romans also have their new capital, Constantinople, to be closer to the Iranians, I guess. And Japan is also becoming more Japan, because their new era has become called Kofun. And as you can clearly see, they have new items, new stuff, new art, new Bronze Age. You also got helmets, and you got Japan. Yeah, pretty cool. So back in the north, probably right here, probably the Romans' only enemy is the Germanic people at this point. And this is what China looks like. That's clearly separated into north and south. And Rome officially becomes 2 individual separate kingdoms, being the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Now Japan also goes into war with Korea, and they win. And also the Gupta Empire exists, ruled by Chandragupta. And the Romans are attacked by Vandals, who ransack Rome and Carthage. And after a while, the same thing happened. They invade Carthage, and then the Visigoths came and ransacked Rome, and under the rule of Attila the Hun. Is Attila the Hun? Where are the Huns? The Huns are these guys. They live in the north, probably above the Eastern Roman Empire. 447 CE, Attila comes in. He starts ransacking places and invading places. And as he finally comes to ransack Rome, he loses, and then he dies. And the Northern Kingdom eventually conquers that Southern Kingdom, and they now become still North and South because, yeah. Now, about right here are the Hunas, who are possibly related to the Huns. And this guy named Julius Nepos is the emperor. And yes, nobody really likes him. So he's succeeded by this guy, Romulus Augustus, who ruled from 475 to 476 CE. Now, by this point, the Western Roman Empire is gone. It's just gone. And they split into these different kingdoms. Some of these will be important later. Anyways, the Eastern Roman Empire is now ruled by Justinian, or instead of Eastern, it's now Byzantine. And he built this big thing called the Hagia Sophia. And the Frankish kingdom start conquering stuff. And Madagascar is also set up by people from Africa and Indonesia as well. Now, England, as you can see here, have kingdoms named as Kent, Sussex, and East Anglia, and Wessex, and Mercia as well. The country or kingdom we're going to be focusing on the most is Wessex. And Wessex is ruled by this guy named Cerdic. And eventually, probably like some years ago, it was actually established by King Arthur, but no one really knows that King Arthur actually existed. So we'll just go with the Cerdic as the king. So the Gupta Empire probably is getting attacked by the Hunas, who are still probably related to the Huns. And the Gupta Empire no longer exists. And Japan also enters a new period called the Asuka period. And Teotihuacan, I have no idea. Let's pretend I pronounced that right. Is still in Mexico, probably by the Mayan civilization. And the new Iranian Empire is also expanding as well. And now we enter the Dark Ages. The Sui dynasty officially conquers all of China. And Korea is still split. And also, the Gokturks are starting to conquer stuff. So, nice going. You can see they kind of live up here. It's now the 7th century CE. The world looks like this. And the spread of Islam officially begins, starting right here by Muhammad. And they also formed the Rashidun Caliphate, and then the Umayyad Caliphate. And then the Tang Dynasty comes along, and it's probably considered the best dynasty in Chinese history. It was briefly interrupted by a female, but it doesn't matter. And now, back to England. England, from Northumbria, is gaining more and more power, and also the Lombards are also kind of doing that. Now, the Sassanid Empire no longer exists, and people from Scandinavia, known as the Vikings, also started raiding a lot of places in Europe. And the Pala Empire, which is formed in Bengal, is now taking over a lot of India. And Japan starts building these new things as they finally kind of convert to Buddhism, and they have a new capital, Kyoto. Now, Pepin the Short, he's currently king of Francia. He dies, and he's succeeded by Charlemagne, who unites the Frankish kingdoms, and on Christmas Day of 800, he is crowned by Pope Leo III as Roman Emperor. Now, what you might be thinking, Romans? Didn't they collapse all those years ago? Well, yes. But I mean these Romans. The Holy Roman Empire. Although Rome is like right there, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, the Kievan Rus is expanding. And they also have these new things. And the Vikings are also expanding. It's 9/11, and the Duchy of Normandy is formed by the Vikings, and now everyone's happy. Rollo, he made a deal with the king of the Franks, Charles III, and they convert to Christianity. And the Kievan Rus is starting to become more powerful, also kind of decreasing its power over time. The Igbo are in Africa, and the House of Wisdom before Muslim or Islam is officially formed. Now it's 978. The King of England gets assassinated. He's replaced by Athelred the Unready. Also, the Huang Chao rebellions come to an end, and the collapse of the classic Mayan civilization. Congratulations, we finally reached the year 1000. The Toltecs come into existence, and the Song Dynasty also comes into existence, which is a pretty nice name to name your kingdom. Japan also enters a new period. It's where a lot more art is created, called the Heian, I guess. And what's been going on in South India with the Chola Empire. And also in South America and North America, there's some more cultures, and they're making new art and pottery. England is still pretty much divided, and they also get invaded by Vikings as well. And then England is officially conquered by the Vikings by Sweyn Forkbeard, who's not really a Viking, but he's more of Danish. And he reigns from 1013 to 1014. He dies and is replaced by Athelred again. But before this, he and his wife Emma of Normandy, as long as their 2 children, well, yeah, he had more, but these are the most important, eventually flee to Normandy, which is technically just a province within France by this point. Now, Edward and Alfred eventually go back to England where they meet Godwin, and Godwin kills his brother. Then Athelred the Unready succeeds Sweyn again. Then he dies on 1016, and he's succeeded by Edmund Ironside, and then he dies a couple of months later. Now Emma of Normandy marries the Danish king, so I guess Athelred died for nothing. So after Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut die, Edward, who was actually Harthacnut's half-brother, is crowned King of England. And as you clearly see, he exiles Godwin. He comes back, though, and in January 1066, Edward dies. And there's 3 men who believe to be the true successors. They are Harold Hardrada of Norway, Harold Godwinson, and Duke William of Normandy. And this guy would eventually succeed him, which make the other 2 very, very mad. In September 1066, Harold Hardrada launches an invasion against England. And not only do they lose, but some guy got sparked in his jewel. So, anyways, on September 27, 1066, William lands in southern England. On October 14th, 1066, William and Harold engage in the Battle of Hastings, which leads William to eventually win. As you can see in this shot, the Normans have heard a rumor that their king or duke has been dead for a little bit, as he had been killed earlier. But William lifted up his helmet, and he proved he's still alive. But who wasn't alive was Harold, who got shot in the eye. Now, William is William the First, or William the Conqueror. And for a while, he starts expanding his dominance over England, building famous towers, which still exist today. Anyways, France is now ruled by the Capet family. And they also go to Manneralism as well. And the Holy Roman Empire is still doing okay. The Kievan Rus starts losing their power, and Ghana is still okay. However, one of the South American civilizations officially goes away, and the Byzantines start losing their power in favor of the Normans. It's now the 1100s, and Southeast Asia is thriving with Khmer from 892. And they're doing okay. And Egypt, well, gets conquered. And Europe looks like this, and we are entering the High Middle Ages, actually. And Frederick Barbarossa starts conquering stuff, and he loses, but he doesn't die. So, anyways, the Gurun Empire finally converts from Islam to Buddhism, and the Toltecs no longer exist, so goodbye. Anyways, the English still exist under Norman rule, and after a few more Norman kings come along, William II, Henry I, and Stephen. Henry I has a son, but he's also married to Matilda. And, well, Matilda actually marries this guy because it's incest. They have a son, Henry II, who rules from 1066 to 1154. And now we have the Angevin Empire, which is mostly just English, I guess. And now they start conquering a lot of France. And also, Henry II marries the Duchess of Aquitaine, Eleanor. And then the Erfurt Latrine, where people were literally dumping fucking shit and died. Anyway, Song is still thriving, but they are attacked by the Jurchen Jin. And Japan has become so important. They have their own image as well. And they also enter a new period and war. And this guy, Minamoto Yorimoto, usually establishes a new shogunate. It's now the 13th century. Eleanor of Aquitaine is dead, and so is Henry II. And also the Byzantines start losing their power over Europe, in Europe as well. It's 1215, and John I of England signs the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. Up here in the north, the Mongols, right here, are led by this guy, Genghis Khan. And this guy was a fucking beast. He basically never lost a battle. He was the most fierce conqueror probably in all of history. And with the help of his most famous general, Subutai, he helps conquer the land like this. On his deathbed, it's reported that he may have said this after he died in 1227, or before. He says, "No signs or markings." And so the Mongols carry his body to this mountain, to Birkenkalden, and they bury his body, and after that, they all kill themselves. And Genghis is succeeded by Ogedei Khan, who was his son, and afterwards, he also continues what his father couldn't do and expand. He expands to like this by the end of his death, before he died in 1241. He was succeeded by two other guys, but none of them are as popular as Kublai Khan, who also was like a beast like his grandfather was. He tried invading Japan twice. Both got sucked up by a typhoon. And he tries again. Same thing happened. And afterwards, he conquers the Song dynasty. And Mongol Empire looks like this. And he was also frequently visited by Marco Polo. Now, the Yuan dynasty is just basically the main thing of the Mongol Empire at this point. It's still ruled by Khans, but yeah, they're all kind of just doing their own thing. The Kievan Rus also no longer exist, and it's replaced by Muscovy. And just some wars happened, some crusades, and now the Mali Empire exists, and the Teutonic Order also exists, and also Cusco exists, and so does the Kingdom Empire and the Great Zimbabwe Empire. Kublai Khan dies in 1294. It's now the 1300s. And the Mongol Empire, which used to exist, now looks like this, with the Golden Horde and Yuan being the most important. Mali is now ruled by Mansa Musa, who is the richest guy on earth. He went on a Hajj to go to the city of Islam, and on his way, he went through Niana from the capital to Gaza, Ain Salah and Gamiz, Jula, and before stopping in Cairo, donating a lot of money, which crashed the fucking stock, and then going to Mecca, the city of Islam. And then he died in 1337, and now it's the early Renaissance period, which is pretty cool. And also the Ottoman Empire begins, and Japan gets a new shogunate again under this guy. And now the Delhi Sultanate is united with another kingdom, and Singapore is finally mentioned. Also, Southeast Asia is still here with the Al-Hudua Kingdom officially coming to life. And also England and France are getting very pissed at each other because Edward III of England declares the French stone as his. So they go to war, and obviously the French aren't very happy about that. So now that this guy from England is now claiming their land, they go to the 100 Years' War. Also, the Mexicans built a new capital called Tenochtitlan. And Tamerlane also expands into the Timurid Empire. And also, the Mississippians collapse their culture, and the bubonic plague just starts spreading from this port in Crimea in 1347. And a lot of people died, which is assumed about 50 million people have died from this plague. And they have these cool masks, which are bird-like masks, so they couldn't get sick. They also had nurses, and they have the same thing. Anyways, the Ming Dynasty now exists after kicking out the Mongols. They also finished that Great Wall from a couple thousand years ago or so. 1381, the English Peasants' Revolt. It's now the 15th century. The Hundred-Year War is still going, but the Greeks are also still fighting against each other, and the Ottomans as well. And the Byzantine Empire and Ottoman Empire is still existing. But in 1453, the Byzantine Empire officially falls to the Ottomans. So that's it, I guess. Also, the Majapahit still exists with a new leader. And also, the Malis are conquered by Songhai. Joan of Arc also starts a siege at Orleans in 1428. A big victory for the Kingdom of France. She also fights in a lot of other battles, and she was brave and fierce. When in 1430, she was captured. She was tried and was executed. She was also made a saint afterwards. And also the Ming Dynasty has finished a new palace at Peking. Also the Aztecs, as you can call them, become to a more powerful beings, and have now built a lot of civilizations. They may seem cool, but it really looks like this. As you can see, just a jumble of kingdoms. Also, the Incas have come to power as well, and they built this place called Machu Picchu. Also, in about 1453, the 100 Years' War comes to an end, although it really lasted 116 years. Also, a lot of art under Da Vinci and Donatello comes to power, and under the War of the Roses, the Tudor family wins and now rules England under Henry VII. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella start an equation to convert from Muslim to Christianity after fighting Reconquista, which ended in the Spanish or Christianity victory. And after that, the Spanish conquered the Canary Islands, which is basically considered the beginning of the Spanish Empire. Anyways, Christopher Columbus, he wants to go to India so he can get those sweet-ass spices. So he sails on a voyage, and he believes to have discovered this part, which is he thinks is India. Well, little does he know, no. Actually, when he landed, there was actually people here, and he called them Indians, but he didn't really care because he believed he found India. What he really found was a land called Americas, and named after Amerigo Vespucci, who was also a conquistador at this time. And also Spain and Portugal divide the world. As you can clearly see, this belongs to Portugal and this belongs to Spain. And the Silk Road no longer exists. It's the 16th century, and big artists like Michelangelo and Raphael come to play. And Michelangelo being more famous for painting the Creatum Atom, and which can be found in the Vatican City, and the statue of David, which is a statue of, David. And one Ponce de Leon settles here in Florida, and eventually to hopefully find the Fountain of Youth, which this may or may not happen. He left, and then he came back, came to settle it, and then he died in 1521. Now, Henry VIII had 6 wives, and that's what he's most famous for, all of which died in their own specific ways. Now, Ferdinand Magellan in 1519 set on a voyage to find the East Indies. He reaches the Philippine Islands to find those sweet, spicy gems and spices. And he tries to go back to Spain, find loot. And while he's sailing, he reaches the Philippines right here. And then he gets killed by the natives. Hernan Cortez also comes along, and he conquers the Aztec Empire. 1532, Francisco Pizarro comes along and conquers the Incas, which is currently in a brief state of civil war, and all of these territories now belong to Spain. Also, the Christian Reformation is happening, and Galileo Galilei discovers physics, and astronomy becomes more popular because of him, because we entered the scientific revolution. Also, Japan goes into a couple of wars. Japan's actually doing a little great, and they also enter the Sengoku period. And Ming is building more pottery, I guess. And world maps are becoming more popular. And you also have the Spanish Armada, who tried invading England, but they failed, and I guess they aren't so invincible. 1585, John White and Sir Walter Raleigh, under the rule of Elizabeth I, go to settle Roanoke Island, and also have the first ever English-born baby in America, Virginia Dare. Sir Walter Raleigh and John White eventually leave the colonists by themselves. They come back about 3 years later in 1590 to find that the colonies still exist, but everyone just vanished. All that is left is the word Croton on a tree, which suggests that they may have moved to Croton Island. And it was the Sur Empire, and it's the 1600s, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth has become a thing. In 1607, the English finally established a permanent colony in Jamestown after their previous failed attempt. They established a colony at Jamestown, which is in Virginia and not North Carolina, like the lost colony was. In 1620, the Pilgrims sailed the sea on the Mayflower, and they eventually reached land at Plymouth Rock, and they have the first Thanksgiving as well. And May has not been as anyways. A couple more wars happen, and Nurhaci, who lives in later Jin, starts conquering Ming. Why not? Anyways, he died in 1626. Hong Taiji becomes the emperor, and he dies in 1636. Now Shunzi is the emperor, which the Chongzhen emperor kills his daughters and hangs himself and his wife beyond the tree behind the Forbidden City. Now the Qing dynasty is the permanent dynasty of which China is relying on. And after another few wars and some more English-related stuff and French stuff too, Louis the 14th is now the king of France, and after French nobility starts losing their power, rely on the Palace of Versailles, Dutch East India becomes a thing under of Isaac Newton, who discovers his balls of motion, and electricity becomes more popular. And the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals are more powerful, but they have more gunpowder. Also, Dutch East India Company conquers Ceylon. And ice cream becomes a thing, and Galileo from earlier discovers 4 planets or moons from Jupiter, meaning Callisto, Europa, Ganymede, and Io. Also, the new Holy Bible, but translated into James or something. And the 30 Years' War begins between the Catholic Church and the German Protestants, and we see who's better. And the handshake was eventually solved by a handshake. Just kidding. It wasn't a handshake. It was a treaty. I have no idea what I'm saying by this point, but crisis has been averted, so I guess no one wins in the end. This is what Europe looks like, and the Habsburg eventually won a war, and are now the permanent ruling dynasty of Austria. Also, the Ottomans and the Russians go to war, and so do a lot of people in a lot of pieces of Europe. And the Dutch and the Portuguese go to war again because they're pissed at each other. And the Dutch win because they're cool like that. And the English Civil War breaks out, in which Oliver Cromwell executes Charles I, and now the Commonwealth or Republic is established in England, with himself as Lord Protector, but eventually that gets overthrown and is now ruled by Charles II. 1665, a great plague breaks out in London, and about a year later, a great fire breaks out, so I guess it was just a really bad year for London. Anyways, the Orange Nassau dynasty, which is Dutch, conquers England in a gloriously revolution, and that's now ruled by William III. The Tokugawa, or from Tokugawa from Japan, officially establishes a new shogunate, which is the new capital of Edo. And Spanish and the French go to war. How surprising. And Peter of Russia has made a new capital as well. He rules Russia. Anyways, the Spanish, the French, and the English, or the British, have made new colonies in North America. Hopefully they won't get any sketchy ideas. In 1700s, what looks like this. And the Spanish Succession War happens, which, holy fuck. Anyways, Prussia has also been declared a new state. In 1707, Queen Anne of England is no longer English, but now British. Also, Peter the Great establishes the new city, like I said. And you might be wondering, who's it named after? Well, his name is Peter. No, but it's actually named after St. Peter from way earlier. Also, Peter abolishes slavery, which is good, right? Well, actually, instead of slaves, it's serfs, which is quite as worse than being a slave. It's now the age of enlightenment, where popular figures like Voltaire write Candide, and the Qianlong Emperor also rules China under Qing, and samurais now rule Japan, but you have to hire them. Anyways, the Mughal Empire's economy starts decreasing, and Australia is eventually established by the British. Also, the British East India Company comes to existence, as well as Peter the Great's Pruth campaign from 1711. Persia also goes into another war, and so do the Russians again. And the Austrian Succession War also happens, and Peter III of Russia is assassinated, or he dies, and is succeeded by Catherine the Great, who just overthrew her own husband. The Atlantic slave trade happened, which saw black people from Africa, from their homeland, taken to America and exported probably back to Britain for more manufactured goods. And the 7 Years' War breaks out, mostly ruled by George III, and Arabia becomes a finally new kingdom. After the 7 Years' War, the British win. In 1765, they introduce a stamp tax on their 13 colonies. And Russia goes to a war again, in the more wars, and Prussia is now ruled by Frederick the Great. And after a brief war fighting with the Indians, actually, the British now introduce a tea tax, both stamp and tea tax, because, yeah. So people dress up as Indians and they toss tea off a British ship. In 1775, a man by the name of Paul Revere says, "The regulars are coming!" And with regulars, they did. Because in the morning at Lexington, a shot that was heard around the world was fired. And before this, after more revolutionary ideas came out and a brief French and Indian War, America and Britain were pretty pissed at each other. So after some help by themselves and some refugees and defectates, in July 1776, Thomas Jefferson writes a Declaration of Independence, which really establishes the United States of America under George Washington. He leads the revolution mainly, and influenced by Thomas Paine, inspires the American soldiers to keep going. Goes on for a while with the help of Rochambeau. And at Yorktown in 1781, Washington and the French fleet surround Cornwallis. And so Cornwallis surrenders. And James Madison and Alexander Hamilton mostly write the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, officially establishing the United States independence across the global stage. And France is currently ruled by Louis XVI, whose economy is literally collapsing. So in 1789, the French Revolution begins, and Louis XVI and the Queen Marie Antoinette flee France, but the Jacobins, who are currently being ruled under the rule of Maximilien Robespierre, officially oust them from power, officially established the First French Republic in 1792. And Louis XVI is executed, and the Reign of Terror officially begins, which over 1,000 people were killed, and the coalition wars began. Robespierre was eventually executed in 1794 himself, and Napoleon Bonaparte officially comes into power, ending the coalition wars, and becomes first consul in 1799. Now, Qianlong, the Emperor of China, officially passed down his power to his son, Jiajing, and he died in 1799. Now, George Washington had been president of the United States from 1789 to 1797 and was succeeded by John Adams in 1797 and 1801. Now, the Americans and the French used to be allies, but they went to war in the Quasi-War, and surprisingly, with the help of the British, nobody won. So, bam, 19th century. It's 1800. Napoleon crosses the Alps at the Battle of Marengo, and he also acquires the Louisiana territory, which was previously owned by Spain. Now, Thomas Jefferson and Napoleon had made a deal. So for a shitload of cash, the United States now owned the Louisiana territory, and Britain is now the United Kingdom under George III still. In 1803, Napoleon would embark on a journey called the Napoleonic Wars, which he would normally fight Britain, Sweden, Russia, Austria, and Prussia. In 1804, he crowns himself emperor and establishes the First French Empire. And he still fights in great victory at Austerlitz in 1805. And Francis, the King of Austria and Holy Roman Empire, officially abolishes the Holy Roman Empire in 1806. An entity that existed for over 1,000 years and officially replaced by the Confederation of the Rhine by Napoleon. Now, Napoleon would have some major victories still until the Peninsular War as well. And in South America, Spanish and Portuguese have ruled the continent for years. And under mostly Simon Bolivar in 1810, Colombia and Chile gained their independence. And the following year, Paraguay and Venezuela gained their independence. Now, Argentina, although it wasn't really Argentina at the time, was technically independent under the United States of the Rio de la Plata. In 1812, the 1812 war began, and the British burnt down the White House. And, of course, Napoleon's failed invasion of Russia, which saw him reach Moscow, actually, but they burnt down the entire city before Napoleon could fully conquer it, and having to go back through the winter. Napoleon saw massive defeats, and after the Battle of Leipzig, he was exiled to Elba, but he came back. He lost again at Waterloo and was exiled, and where he died. Now, South America has kind of fully became independent, and the United States is now manifesting their destiny by going west and kicking out the natives up from their land. Now, Jiajing dies and is replaced by the Emperor Daoguang, and the Ottomans also start kind of losing their power in Europe. And also, after the Greek independent wars and the Tokugawa crisis and the Texas Revolution, the world is kind of in a shaky place because Texas is now surrounded by Mexico, who used to be a superpower, and the United States. And also, the Opium Wars happened. Why did they happen? Because Britain was selling opium to Qing, and then Qing just stopped one day. And speaking of Britain, George III died in 1820. He was replaced by George IV and William IV, but none of them are important as Queen Victoria was, who became the queen after the death of William IV in 1837, which began the Victorian era as well. So it's 1826, and the first ever photograph was taken, and Texas joins the United States and embarks in the Mexican-American War. Also, right after the gold was found in California, so now everyone's playing west. It's 1850, and the Missouri Compromise line was officially established, which provides that slave states can no longer have slave states above that line, which made the South even more mad than they were before. Anyways, Dao Guang dies in 1850, succeeded by Xian Feng, which is likely considered the downfall of the Qing dynasty. And in December 1860, Hong Xuan, I did not pronounce that right. He's the self-proclaimed brother of Jesus Christ, and he goes on the Heavenly Tapingly Kingdom, which he wants to convert entirely of Qing dynasty into Christian. And the Irish had a potato famine, and the first voices ever recorded in 1860. Xian Feng dies in 1861. The Heavenly Taping Rebellion is still going on, and Qing loses a lot of land from foreign powers. Anyways, after being pissed for a while and bleeding Kansas, the Confederate States of America was officially formed. And as you can see, the Confederates support the slavery, and the United States hates slavery. Under the rule of Abraham Lincoln, the American Civil War would officially begin, which saw massive casualties, massive victories for the Union, and massive victories for the South. In 1865, Abe Lincoln was assassinated, and the United States came out on top as the victor of the Civil War. In the 1860s, Russia is also going through some stuff. The French have become a new empire under the rule of Napoleon III. The Italian unification has become, and because Sardinia conquered all these nations and now unified them into the Kingdom of Italy. In 1867, Austria-Hungary becomes a thing after succeeding Austria. In 1868, Meiji abolishes the Tokugawa dynasty and officially establishes the Empire of Japan. In 1870 to 1871, the Franco-Prussian War happens, which also establishes the German Empire under Prussia. Also, in 1871, briefly, the capital of France became communist. They mostly were influenced by Karl Marx, who in 1838 wrote the Communist Manifesto. So I guess communism was just a big thing back then. So now the global superpowers are mostly the United States, France, Russia, and Britain. As you can clearly see, the United Kingdom, speaking of which, the Mughal Empire collapsed and the British Raj took its place. And in 1879, the Anglo-Zulu War began, which the Zulus won. And then the Boer War began. Krakatoa happened. In 1884, the Berlin Conference happened, which saw European powers scramble for Africa. And mostly West Africa was ruled by the French, and a lot of kind of easternish, southern Africa was ruled by the British. In the 1890s, the Boxer Rebellion and the Sino-Japanese War happened, which saw a lot of casualties, and European powers and even Japan start taking pieces of China. In 1896, the first modern Olympics happened, and they had a good time. From 1898 to 1899, Second Boer War happens, and the USS Maine blows up, and the U.S. blames it on Spain so they can conquer their land and stuff. And they eventually get Cuba and the Philippines, and the Boxer Rebellion officially happens, which saw lots of European powers come into play and take China. Britain, France, Japan, Russia, Germany, the United States, Italy, and even Austria-Hungary start invading China and taking stuff for their own. It's now the 20th century. It's 1900s. And the Boxer Rebellion still goes on. And the Qing dynasty is not happy. It's 1901. Australia officially becomes a commonwealth, its own nation. But it's mostly ruled by Britain. Speaking of Britain, Queen Victoria officially dies after 63 years. And the 25th president, William McKinley, is also assassinated and is replaced by Theodore Roosevelt. Cuba officially gains independence from the United States in 1902. In 1904, the Panama Canal is officially commenced. In 1905, the first Russian revolution-ish movement goes in. And Japan and Russia go to war, and Japan actually wins, securing Japan's stage on the global powers and making Japan a worldly global dominant power. And also in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake happens. Einstein makes the E = mc squared equation. Now Bulgaria says fuck you to the Ottomans and declares their independence in 1908. Guangxu was the emperor of Qing, dies as well, and is replaced by a fucking 2-year-old who was chosen by the Empress Dowager, who also dies a day later. 1903, Panama declared their independence, which wasn't recognized by Colombia until 1909. It's now the 1910s. 1910 to 1911, the Qing has been in crisis for a while, and in 1911, the Xinhai Revolution begins under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen, who by far leads a republic into China and establishes the republic officially. And after the abdication of Zhuangtong Emperor, the 2,000-year-old monarchy is officially abolished and replaced by the Republic of China under the leadership of Yuan Shikai. Now, Yuan Shikai was actually a Qing loyalist until he was promised presidency, so he switched sides. Meiji died, and the sinking of the Titanic happened, and Albania declared their independence from the Ottomans. And another war happened, the First Balkan War, and then the Second Balkan War happened, which saw Bulgaria being attacked by everyone, and Woodrow Wilson becomes president. In 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria is just cruising down Sarajevo, and Gavrilo Princip shoots him and his wife. And Austria-Hungary is preferably pissed at Serbia and officially declares war on Serbia. Now, Austria-Hungary is backed up by Germany, and Serbia is backed up by Russia, who is now going to invade Austria and Germany. And Russia is friends with France, who is going to invade Germany, and France is friends with Britain and also Montenegro. Now, Germany was going to go around Belgium to invade France because France had their defenses lined up on their border. And what happened next was by far one of the worst events that could have happened in the entire history of Belgium itself. And World War I lasted for a long time, and also the Battle of the Somme officially began at the Western Front. It saw lots of casualties, like I've mentioned before, because I have nothing else to say. 1915, Italy officially joined the Entente, and the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers. Now, between the Ottoman Empire, the Armenian genocide began, in which the Ottoman Empire denied. It's 1916. Now the Battle of the Somme had began, and here's a map showing the French, Canadian, and British troops being attacked or forcing themselves into Germany. Japan also takes a lot of Germany's islands, and Yuan Shikai declares a new Chinese monarchy until he's quickly deposed and he dies. Later in 1916, Verdun begins, which is by far the bloodiest battle in the entirety of World War I. Now, in early 1917, Germany tries sending a message to Mexico, but Britain intercepts it and shows it to the United States. So the United States knows that Germany was trying to get Mexico to invade America. So America officially declares war on Germany. And Vladimir Lenin leads the Russian Revolution in July 1918. He executes Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family. And the Treaty of Versailles is officially signed, and the World War I will end on November 11th at 11 a.m. And now we have the peace conference, the treaty is signed, and the Weimar Republic is established following the German Empire's fall. Austria-Hungary is split, Yugoslavia is formed, and the Ottoman Empire is partitioned. The Russian FSSR and Poland become in existence, and it's now the 1920s, and the League of Nations comes into power. And the election in 1920 happens. Well, Wilson won the third term. He was severely sick at the time, but it didn't even matter because he wouldn't serve the entire term anyway because he died in 1924. Europe looks like this, with new countries emerging from the rubble of Austria-Hungary, as well as Poland and Danzig. It's 1921, and Adolf Hitler becomes the new leader of the NSDAP party, or the Nazi party. He also writes a book in prison. And now it's the Roaring '20s, which is a good time to be alive, mostly ruled by American President Calvin Coolidge. On December 30th, 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics is officially declared by Lenin, and in 1922, Turkey is formed after the Ottomans finally just no longer exist. And Hitler leads a beer pong push, and in 1924, Lenin dies and is replaced by Joseph Stalin. And Japan has a new emperor known as Showa or Hirohito, and in 1929, Coolidge leaves office and is replaced by President Herbert Hoover. And the Wall Street crash happens, so Coolidge just narrowly avoid that. In 1930s, the new election happens, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt is now the president, and the economy is still crashing. So he signs a New Deal in hopes that the economy will get better. In 1933, Paul von Hindenburg makes Adolf Hitler the Chancellor of Germany. And in 1934, after Hindenburg's death, Hitler becomes the Führer of Germany, in which he enacts the Night of Broken Knives, or the Night of the Long Knives. My apologies. And Israel and Palestine officially have more Jews because the British just shoving them all there. The Spanish Civil War breaks out, and Francisco Franco wins, and now established Franco with Spain. Stalin also begins his Great Purge, in which when he has enemies, he exterminates them and gets rid of their entire existence in general. Hitler's first attempt at showing his anti-Semitic policies was in the Berlin 1936 Olympics. The Hindenburg disaster happened, the Anschluss happened, and the Kristallnacht also happened. After the annexation of Austria, Beijing, of the Sudetenland, and the invasion of Czechoslovakia in whole, Europe was kind of shifting on power, and everyone was getting scared. Now, China experienced the worst thing it could have ever had with the rape of Nanking, where Japanese soldiers killed tons and millions of people. Manchukuo was also taken in 1931, but wasn't fully established until 1937, and it's ruled by none other than their old emperor, Puyi, no longer Xuantong. So Hitler has expanded more power. Franklin Roosevelt got America out of the Great Depression. And after the invasion of Poland in 1939, Britain and France declare war on Nazi Germany, which begins World War II and the 1940s. Now, the Tripartite Pact was signed, which bring Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan together. And after the invasion of Denmark, Norway, and the invasion of the Low Countries, it's finally time to invade France. So Winston Churchill called it's their finest hour. And after a brief evacuation at Dunkirk, France falls to the Nazis, and it's partitioned into two parts. Now, people, of course, were not happy about this, specifically Charles de Gaulle, who forms Free France. Now, the Axis eventually invade the Balkans, and Japan takes a lot of the Pacific Islands, and Operation Barbarossa begins, which was Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union. And it was by far the largest ground invasion ever, and the Holocaust officially began, which started with Hitler exploring tons and tons of Jews into concentration camps where they'd be forced labor and eventually gassed. On December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and Roosevelt, having no choice, officially declares war on Japan, and so does Britain, and Germany declares war on the United States. And the Pacific War happens for a while, and Japan conquers more stuff under the rulership of Douglas MacArthur, who was an American. And the Battle of Stalingrad happens. Italy surrenders. Eisenhower is now the commander of the European army for America. France is liberated. FDR dies and is replaced by Harry Truman. Hitler dies because he killed himself after a bomb test led by Julius Robert Oppenheimer. They dropped a bomb on Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. And Japan surrenders on September 2nd. From 1939 to 1945, there have been 75 million casualties. The United Nations formed, Germany's partition, and the Nuremberg trials happened. Mahatma Gandhi officially establishes India after a hunger revolt. And the Chinese Civil War breaks out when in 1949 the People's Republic of China is formed. NATO and the Eastern Bloc are formed. And mandatory Palestine is split into two states, one for the Jews, one for the Arabs, and Germany is split into two nations. In the 1950s, the U.S. and Soviet Union engage in the Cold War. However, they don't attack each other because that would be the end of the world. Korea is also in a war, but that just goes into stalemate. The UK has a new Queen Elizabeth II, and Eisenhower is now the president. Joseph Stalin dies in 1953 and is mostly replaced by Nikita Khrushchev, not Georgy Malenkov. In 1957, launches Sputnik, and the space race begins, so America finds NASA. De Gaulle becomes president, and it's also the age of early rock and roll, with big figures like Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly coming into play and establishing that position in rock and roll and music. So after the French Indochina War, Vietnam looks like this. The Vietnam War officially begins between communism and democracy. It's the 1960s. John F. Kennedy is the president. And the Cold War is by far at its height. The Soviets send their first man to space, and the Berlin Wall is established. It's now the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1962, and the British have the Beatles, which are very popular. And by this point, it's now decolonization before the British and even the French. And MLK leads to the March on Washington against racism. JFK wants to land a man on the moon, but that doesn't end well for him, and he's replaced by LBJ. And then he's replaced by Nixon in July 1969. They have finally do land a man on the moon with these guys. Two of them actually stepped on the moon. One just stayed in for, supervising. It's the 70s, and after a brief massacre at Munich during the Olympics, Israeli and Palestinian tensions get even higher, and Nixon resigns after Watergate. In 1975, Pol Pot, who is now the dictator of Cambodia, leads the Cambodian genocide. And Vietnam War ends, and the Ayatollah of Iran leads the Iranian Revolution, which abolishes the monarchy and establishes the Islamic Republic, which very hurts Jimmy Carter's image. It's now the 1980s, and the Russians are now invading Afghanistan, and Reagan's president, and by this point, they really like sending people into space, some of which went very well, others kind of didn't. And Gorbachev is now the chancellor or leader of the USSR, and the Berlin Wall officially falls, and so does the Tiananmen Square massacre, which is the famous photo of Tank Man standing in front of tanks. Now in the 1990s, Germany's partition, the Soviet Union also collapses, and its flag is lowered for the first time after Mikhail Gorbachev's resignation on December 25th, 1991. The Gulf War also happened. Yugoslavia is breaking up, as well as the Bosnian War. The LA riots happened after the beating of Rodney King. And the Rwandan genocide happened, and so does the Oklahoma City bombing. Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton have affairs, I guess. And Zaire was officially abolished by the Second Congo War. And very big figures like SpongeBob come to power. Or the power in the Kids Network. The European Union is finally established, which means we can finally move on to the 21st century. Y2K has happened, which everyone thought the world would end because of technology was just starting to not function. 9/11 happened, and America will remember that always and forever. George Bush signs into the Patriot Act, and so as the Iraq War begins, and Europe officially establishes the euro as their main currency. Barack Obama is elected president, in which he really wants to stop gun violence. iPhone is established, and Libya is no longer under a dictatorship, and now everyone's addicted to social media. YouTube comes into power, and now everyone's addicted to that. Like big figures like Mr. Beast come into play too. Global warming is a big thing. Russia annexes Crimea. Everyone legalizes same-sex marriage. And Afghanistan is being terrorized by the Americans. Britain leaves the European Union, the Black Hole photograph. Donald Trump's president, and he wants to keep out the Mexicans, so he builds a wall. And after losing the 2020 election, he raised the capital. Global warming is still a very bad thing. COVID is now infecting everyone. Everyone's addicted to TikTok. Queen Lizzie died. And after a war in Ukraine and Hamas attacking Israel, now Israel's in Gaza, Antarctica is claimed to have flowers blooming out of it, although it's a picture of Greenland. And after all of this yapping, I still can't find a way to get to school.